Good evening, everybody. It's 9:30 p.m. on the East Coast, 6:30 p.m. on the West Coast. It's time for your weekly Calamity Jane live stream. James, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well, and I hope you're doing well on your side of town.
I'm making it. I'm making it. Keep on keeping on. That's the old saw that the kids say. I don't think any kid actually says that. I think
Yeah, no,
anybody younger than the age of 60 doesn't say that, except for me.
well, but we'll go with it. We'll pretend for our
Okay.
little spot in the universe. That's a very common theme, and all the kids on the playground, everywhere, on the basketball court,
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah, no, all of the kids and their TikToks, it's like
Yeah.
they always talk about keeping on, keeping on.
If it's our universe, can we just eliminate TikTok and
Oh,
eliminate?
wouldn't that
Yeah,
be delightful? Like TikTok never was invented. Oh,
we
I'd
can
love
keep
it.
that at least for a few minutes, I
Yeah,
suppose, right?
yeah,
So, well, I'll just get into it.
yeah. Let's go ahead and start working.
Let's see here. I'll go share screen, share, and you may,
Oh, it's a warhog. What is happening here?
yeah, you may recognize some of these a familiar foe.
Yeah.
So as you as even early when we first started our stream, we started working. I started working on warhog stuff, and I realized that I need a front pose of warhog running towards us, right?
Yeah, you do.
So I have a little cycle of it. It's kind of broken up with the drawing, but let me change it over to a white background and you'll see. But yeah, this is meant to be another cycle of the Warhog running towards. So I'm going to work on that tonight as we kind of hang out a little
That
bit.
sounds good. That sounds
Block
good.
it out. It's really simple. I kind of, you know, for me, part of the fun I think about this character is I do like how I'm happy I'm here talking about my drawing.
Hey, I mean, I couldn't draw it, so take the credit where it's earned, my friend.
But what I do like about this particular character is I think I just luckily had some abstractness thing kind of going on. I kind of like how it's got a little obtuse angles and like just kind of nothing's perfect on these guys,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it gives me a lot of leeway for animation and abstraction for animation, which is it's literally this is just a two-frame cycle, but I kind of polish up here in the timeline, do a little bit of subtle things here and there.
Right, like I can see the
Yeah,
Razorback kind of compressing as he
yeah,
lands. Yeah, it's pretty
yeah.
cool.
So I am going to try to keep in the spirit of that, doing this front view. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I think I haven't worked on Warhawk stuff in at least it feels like a year. So, anyways, but that's where my headspace is. But I do have a challenge though for myself, and
Oh,
I
okay. All right.
the design challenge here. So you see here on all the silhouettes, even three quarters profile, even the run, I don't have to worry about actually separating the nostrils and the nose area from the rest of the body because it's all kind of part of the shape.
Right.
From guess what though? I mean, when I go into it, and I already know. I mean, I'm just bringing up this. I'm gonna have this. Let's pretend is the body, and then I'll have the nostrils, like
Mm-hmm.
this,
Mm-hmm.
and then lo and behold, I don't really have any. There's no definition for the actual snout. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think I might do a on the fly design change to Warhog a little bit.
Okay.
What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually carve out an actual shape for the front part of the nostril. So in other words, so when we see the nostril, this area right here, the circle area, it'll be like this and like this. And I will just kind of add the color here like this. And the rest of the nostril will be pretty much the same brown.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the direction I'm going to go with tonight to take care of this front pose, and probably from now on it'll be hard baked in the rest of the character. So there'll always be a slighter different shade for the warhog going forward. So it'll be kind of something like that, but this will go a little bigger. Let me just do this. Really rough version, but yeah, it'll be like something like that.
I think that makes sense, and it makes it a little bit more pig snouty-ish. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So we're gonna do. I'm gonna be doing that tonight a little bit. So yeah, we'll get to it.
Very cool.
So doing
Yeah.
that, I'm gonna tell you. As we often do when we're talking video games, I did give a try to that Captain Toad
Mm,
game on the Switch, and
indeed.
we were raving about it. And
Yeah.
I think you and I agree. You got me into your camp on this one. I mean, it's an awesome game.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's quite good. It was one of my favorite games on the Wii U generation. And I didn't buy it when they ported it to the Switch because they only added some Super Mario Odyssey themed stages at first. They later added paid DLC, and I still didn't bite. But over New Year's, they dropped the price to like $30, and I'm like, okay. So I
I was
bought, and then I played it, and it's like, oh wow, I just forgot how much I like that game.
yeah, and I they had it like after the sale, they did a whole 2 day like play the game for free thing, and that's when I actually played it. I give it a run for that, and yeah, it's on my list now. I'll buy it eventually.
Yeah, and
I
they'll
probably won't.
probably do another sale, like holiday sale or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
So the intention is I will play it at some point, but yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that game. So I just want to say thanks for recommending the game. I thought it was great.
Do what I can. I do what I can. I'm glad that sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I'll recommend something to you, and you're like, I don't know what you thought what I was gonna get out of this.
So
Uh,
in the meanwhile, so now while I'm waiting for that sale to, well, whenever that sale eventually happens, I do have my, I do scratch, I need to scratch my itch for another game. I did pick up, I mean, I have in my library Hollow Knight, and I started playing that again.
mm-hmm.
I gotta tell you, the first time I played it, I thought it was too hard.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of annoying, but it is growing on me, oddly enough. Now I gave it another shot, and it is starting to grow on me now. And I know for you, you I mean, judging the book by the cover, you weren't really thrilled with this game, right?
I mean, the art style never appealed to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I had heard that it was very difficult. And hearing you, the man who loves Dark Souls and Neo and other such products, say that it was too hard is not like a rousing word of like Eric
Yeah.
should play this game. I mean, it feels like it would be a game that I would play for 2 seconds and go, nope, this is not for me, and then abandon it
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. I feel bad. I feel bad about. Hopefully, I didn't. It feels to me like obviously kind of more of a fanboy made version for like a Castlevania style game or something. Like there is some elements of it that make it a lot of fun. But again, if we look back, you and I both we played Castlevania, right? I mean, did you ever go all the way through the end of Castlevania and beat it?
Which one?
The first one.
Oh, no, I don't think I've ever actually beaten the first Castlevania.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, because to me that's a good barometer because Castlevania is a pretty difficult game.
Yeah,
I'd say.
yeah, it is, but it's also of a generation where you would get one game, and that would be the only game you got until
Yes.
Christmas, right?
True. Yeah.
And whether it was good or bad, it's all you got. So you played it to death, and you got good at it.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the thing is Um, yeah, the mindset was different. Now you have so many choices. Why play a hard game? But here we are today, and we're still playing hard games. Like
Mm-hmm.
again, Zelda comes to mind, the new Breath of the Wild version. You and I both weren't really feeling that.
Yeah, yeah, that is true.
Yeah. So, but with all that being said, yeah, Hollow it's not as bad. It's not as bad as I originally thought it was. I'm still out there. I'm still playing it, and I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna be on this journey another 2 weeks or something like that. If I keep
Mm-hmm.
playing, where will I be? I don't know. Who knows? Does anybody care? No, and it's okay. But I'll still keep playing it. And I'll bore you with the details later.
I'm ready to be bored with it. I didn't know that it was a Metroidvania esque game.
Yeah.
Oh, with a an indie minimalist art aesthetic, which is just like inside or what are the other ones? I mean, there's a million of them, right? Little Nightmares. I mean, Little Nightmares isn't minimal aesthetic, but it's the same kind of dark foreboding. Everything is a metaphor for depression kind of world.
I've never heard of that game. Little Nightmares.
Mm-hmm. One and two. It's a platformer, um, and the overwrought metaphor is a child coping with depression or something like that. I mean, it feels like every indie game, the underlying metaphor, such that there is one, is child coping with depression.
I see.
And it's just another one that you can add to that list. I don't think people who write stories for video games have a lot of ideas. I think that they all are coming from the same perspective, right? There's not a huge diversity of voices in the games industry.
Uh huh.
And so, in my experience, in my professional opinion, I don't find game stories to be particularly interesting or compelling because it's the same kind of upper middle class white man who is writing all of these, or a lot of them, and it's just not. There's just not a lot of variety to the worlds that they're building because it's always the same kinds of people writing the stories for all of these games.
Hmm.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I was so, I think, delighted by Unpacking. You know, we've talked about that in the past, and
Yeah.
how
You.
much I really like that game.
Yeah. Um. Well, who was unpacking done by? Like, would just like I don't know who the designer is or anybody. Like, where they?
Which Beam? I don't remember who the creative director was. I don't remember her name at least. But it was, it was just different. Like, if anything else, and I enjoyed playing the game a great deal, right? But
Mhm.
even if the game was not particularly fun, it just the story it told was one that was interesting, right? It was different. It was like a journey that didn't involve murdering things or overcoming existential crises
Mhm.
and I think that was one of the reasons why I got so sucked in by it is
Mhm.
that it had a different world that it was exploring and it had a different voice to explore it with.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that part of it is? I mean, sure. There's probably a social economic or and in some ways, like as you could say, it's also with race too, and there are a lot of the sameness is there for life experiences for some people, but there are some things that kind of transcend race and social economic statics with like depression itself, like the whole
Sure.
like that's a human condition, right? So there are some games that probably transcend that probably come to mind that could probably well not come to mind to me for me. There might there I guess that's what I'm saying is that there's an appeal there for that. If I'm playing the other side, if I'm trying to debate this, which I can't really, I just don't. I don't know. I'm more or less listening, but I'm just trying to.
I
That's the question
guess.
that comes in.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. I feel like that there are stories that you can tell that aren't necessarily depressing,
Uh,
um, or that are not about some overcoming some sort of existential crisis, whether that's depression or anxiety, which seems to be the emotions du jour. But if they want to do that, that's fine. But there's so many emotions under the sun that never really get explored in most indie games, in my opinion. And I haven't played Hollow Knight, so I don't know for sure, but it strikes me that game and Inside and um, I'm like there's a million of them and I'm drawing a blank on most of them right now.
yeah, sure. I mean, you can pick a Hollow Knight. That's the game I brought up tonight. So yeah,
So
yeah,
and Little
I,
Nightmares, I mentioned that
yeah.
and there's all these games about shepherding characters off to death and that kind of stuff. Like Spiritfarer is another example of that.
Mhm.
There's a lot of morbidity in indie game storytelling, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then by the same token in AAA game storytelling it's just about traditional male conflict, right? Like
Mhm.
there's not really any exploration of conflict in any other form other than find bad guy, shoot bad guy, make bad guy dead, right?
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, I love shooter games, right? But I don't play shooter games for the story. So when EA tries to do some sort of ham-fisted, or not EA, I guess, Activision, or I guess maybe I should say Microsoft now.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Yeah. But when Activision tries to do some sort of ham-fisted meaning to their Call of Duty stories, it's like it comes across shallow and meaningless, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't come across genuine at all. It comes across like somebody grabbed a checklist of this is how you make a story meaningful, and then just went down the checklist, and there's no soul, there's no pathos, there's nothing interesting about what they're doing.
yeah, yeah. Um, I'm trying to think here. Like, I mean, there are these are all AAA though. I can't think of a. I'm trying to think of a positive feeling indie game where that wasn't the case.
I mean, I can think about it. It Takes Two, right?
Okay.
That I think is a good example. I don't know that I would really call that an indie game, although that term is increasingly squishy, right? I mean, it was self-funded, but then
Yeah.
published by a publisher.
Hmm.
It was done by the guy who did Brothers, and who did
Okay, there we
he,
go.
yeah, he's obsessed with duality in
Mhm.
all of his stories, right? There's this, and that is a whole other rabbit hole I can go down to, like this concept of binaries, right? Um, anyway, so It Takes Two. It's won a bunch of awards, and it's about an estranged couple who are shrunk down, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style, and then have to learn to cooperate again to survive this all of a sudden very threatening domestic world, right?
Well, they're actually fighting bugs and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Or
they're fighting bugs. Yeah, literally, they're fighting bugs, and they each have a different weapon, and
Mhm.
each weapon does something else. And every puzzle in the game requires both characters. So basically, you can't play it unless you have two people to play with, right?
Okay.
Which, in my mind, it's like good on you. You're trying something ambitious, but also, I don't know many people who play video games. Um, uh, or if they do play video games, aren't around consistently enough to devote, their game playing time to do this mandatory co-op experience, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I never played it. I mean, I've watched videos about it, and I'm aware of it, but you actually can't really. I mean, you can. There's like a single player mode where you swap back and forth between the two,
Hmm.
but it was an afterthought, and doesn't actually work. Um, yeah. I mean, I think you can play it online, but again, why would I want to play with strangers? Like, strangers on the internet are the worst thing ever.
Yeah, they can be pretty. Strangers on the internet can be pretty annoying. That's for sure.
hmm
Yeah.
Um, but in any case, so I mean, you'll get games like It Takes Two, and I don't remember how the story ends. I don't know if the parents end up reconciling, or if they do end up getting divorced at the end, or what happens. But for every It Takes Two, there's like 1,000 little nightmares, right?
Mhm.
And
I wish I knew these games to kind of, and I mean, just imagine them in my head a little bit to kind of contribute. Like, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't have any context for either of these two games. I kind of want to check them out though, or at least watch a
yeah,
video.
yeah, definitely check them out.
Hmm.
Um,
What
but
about
yeah,
what about the game Fez? That game. What was that one about? I mean, that one had just the idea of rotating around a tower, of
yeah.
rotating.
I mean, it had a really fun mechanic. If there was some sort of like heady subtext, some sort of metaphor to all of it, which I mean, it went over my head at least. Similar to Braid, where it was fun graphics, fun mechanic, but there was this sort of underlying subtext, which I think people have, like Jonathan Blow has largely said that it was about nuclear war
Oh,
somehow, and it's just like, okay, like, sure, if you say so, I'll take your word for it. I don't know why, but sure, right? And sometimes just games are the messages that the creators want to express. You can
yeah.
argue like this is genius or you're full of shit, right? And it's
Yeah,
sort
I
of in the
mean,
eye of the beholder, like a Jackson Pollock painting. You know.
yeah, or trying to be a little bit, or the self-importance is just too glaring to where they really want it to be really more important than it is. It's just a stupid game.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and I know
it,
Fez had that as well.
uh-huh.
I liked a lot of Fez. I like the graphic style. I love the rotating, 2D spaces. Some of the puzzles were really clever, but some
Mm-hmm.
of the puzzles were so obtuse as to be basically impossible to solve. I mean, I played almost like a third of that game with a guide next to me just so I could figure out how to get through it. Right? I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was so obscure. The designer, was John or Phil Fish. He was a one man show, right? I mean, everything he did it on his own, and like unless you could, you were on sort of his same wavelength from a puzzle design standpoint,
Yeah, you were kind of
you were kind
out.
of, yeah, exactly. It was sort of a crapshoot. And I definitely wasn't on his wavelength in terms of solving puzzles. So
Mm-hmm.
love the visuals, love the basic idea of the mechanics, but the puzzle design itself was way too obtuse for me.
Yeah.
So
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of any other indie games I've played. So as far as Hollow Knight's concerned, I think it's just is it the visuals. There's nothing. Uh, I mean see colors invoke emotion, so it
mm-hmm,
does look depressing, but the game is
mm-hmm.
not that depressing. I mean, at least, or maybe I've built up an immunity to it. Like maybe I've played too many depressing games. Dark Souls, another one where it is isolation, and the color palette's muddy and kind of. I was never a big fan of Dark Souls color palette. I've always hated it for that, but the gameplay was fun, so I kept playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, just because a color palette evokes a particular mood doesn't mean that the underlying metaphor is actually about that emotion. But
Yeah,
I know in the case of at least some of these indie games, I mean, the designers are very explicit about the axe that they're grinding. Another one, at least in the first one, and I don't know if they. I didn't really play the second one at all. Ori and the Blind Forest.
okay, yeah, yeah. I
That
have that
one's
one. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's all about coping with loss, right?
Oh,
So
really?
it's yeah. So your friend dies at the beginning of the game, and then the whole subtext of the world that you're exploring is about you coping with that loss. But it's still a Metroidvania game, and so there's just it's still bound by the rules and the mechanics of this particular subgenre of action games. And so it's like, you know, you claim that the subtext is dealing with loss, but what does collecting magical orbs to refill your magic meter what does that have to do with coping with loss? What phase of mourning is that, right? Is that anger? Is collecting orbs from defeated enemies, is that the anger stage of grief, right? you know
Yeah,
is that acceptance? I don't know, right? And so it's I what I find is that they have this sort of vague theme that they want everybody to believe is more significant or impactful than it actually is.
yeah, and that's where it borderline. See, when you're trying to put too much meaning into basic Metro a game that's already been done to death for 30 years now, a Metroid game, and then you try to put some sort of other meaning into it that's important to you as a human. Where does it? You're walking that fine line between being genuine and also pretentiousness. It's a really weird spot to be in because you're trying to really invoke that. Yeah, this is a really important game, but is it? Because we're just playing Metroid. And
Right.
so, for me as a human player that wants to play it, if I do that going in, I'm playing it going, well, do I respect this fellow human's feelings? This is what it is, or am I just playing Metroid? Like, and yeah, it's like, you know, what do you do when you walk into a gallery and you see a piece see a work on the wall, and then you need a little placard to tell you what the feeling was meant for by the artist. Is it genuine because it's in a museum space, or is it pretentious because the artist is saying this just to get in the museum space? You can't help.
Yeah.
For me, I always ask that question. I never take museums very seriously. I love the structures a lot, and I love exhibits, but I always ask those questions. And video games shouldn't have to be shielded from that either.
No, I think it's reasonable. I think the mistake is I mean, it's not a mistake, it's just the reality of who are making games, it's a singular perspective. There's just frankly not a lot of diversity of voices in game writing, pure and simple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and a lot of game writers, I mean, there are some game writers who just are trying to have a good time,
Yeah.
write something tropey or silly or whatever. But I find it to be the exception rather than the rule.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and 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 I also prefer David Lynch's approach, right? I mean, it's to a certain extent like I'm actually more on board with the Phil Fish, Jonathan Blow methodology, where it's just like, it means something to me. What does it mean to you, right? Versus sort of the clear, very heavy-handed, obvious metaphors of some of these other indie games. And it's in the case of Fez and Braid, and The Witness, which is another Jonathan Blow game. You could almost claim it's like Lynchian, because David Lynch does a similar thing in his films. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. He knows what themes and images and metaphors he wants to represent. But if you ask him, what does this movie mean? His response is, well, what does it mean to you? Right?
Yeah, and that's actually I totally am board. I'm on board with that. That's
Yeah.
the way to look at it because, yeah,
Yeah, but then, like, you've got this hubris of Jonathan Blow, where in an interview they go, like, does it have meaning? And he goes, yes. It's like, is it this? And he goes, no, you're wrong. Well, it's like, no, you're not wrong, right? Like, if you need to create art, and you need to create it from a personal place.
yeah,
But if you are going to share it with other people, you need to embrace the fact that people are going to take something different away from it, good or bad, aligned with your thoughts or not aligned with your thoughts. What's important is that you create something that people are impacted by,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's less important whether they get what you were trying to say, and more important that they get something from it at all, right?
yeah. I mean, if you're trying, it's one thing to write or create a story, and then you have your intention of writing or creating that story, but once you put it out in public domain for public consumption, well, all bets are off. It becomes part of the universe at that point. You've spoken your word, and if you were successful as a creator or an artist with your messaging, then they'll get it. An audience member will get it. But if they don't, you can't fault the audience. You can fault yourself for having not the right communication methods or for telling the message you wanted to say. And it's okay. You go back to the drawing board, try it again, or let's as I'm going to adopt this term from you, this Lynchian method, which is just let it be and let people interpret how they want to interpret it. I mean, that's a great way to do it. It's actually the smartest way to do it because it frees the artist from having any responsibility.
I mean, that's kind of a cynical way to view it, but yeah. I mean, in the case of Lynch, I do believe that he genuinely has thoughts, and he does have ideas that he wants to express, and he lets it up to the audience to take either to take what he wants out of it or to find their own meaning, right?
Yeah.
So like, and that's always the challenge with a lot of modern art is okay, you claim that this has meaning, but does it really?
Yes.
Like I watch, and maybe that's my problem with Braid and Fez and that kind of stuff, is the artists claim, oh yeah, no, this has meaning, and you play it and you go, okay, this is just mostly a puzzle game, right? Like,
yeah. I will say that it's funny. The thing from Braid, the only thing I walked away from is the way you could rewind the game and keep playing stuff over and over again. To me, that was pretty unique at the time, except for if you play a hack, a ROM hack or something, and you're able to do that. I thought that was really fun to see that in an actual game itself. I haven't seen it done before since then, actually, where I can rewind games, but it's not like I play every game every day. So
yeah, I mean, Prince of Persia did a pretty good job with it. That game, the remakes, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. All you had to do is hold down a button, and you had so much sand in your
Oh, that's
magical
cool.
hourglass, and then it would just rewind. Basically just it kept an input buffer, and you
Hmm.
could just rewind, and it would undo the input and reverse animations. It's more the implementation is more complicated than that, but um,
That's not from the original. I mean, I played the original Prince of Persia. I don't
oh
remember
no
the.
no, this is the first of the 3D ones.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, cool.
Um, but I don't, and that came before Braid because I
Okay.
played that when I was still living in Seattle in
Mhm.
college, and Braid came out when I was in LA. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so they've played around with time manipulation in games, and I think it's cool, and I really enjoyed playing Braid. And unlike Fez, like I solved all the puzzles in Braid. I was actually able to get through that game, and it was
Hmm.
it was entertaining.
Hmm.
Um, but he had these in Braid. I don't know if you remember much of it, but there would be rooms where you could read these diary entries,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, I remember that.
they were largely non sequiturs, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it was sort of open to your interpretation what was being said in them, um, and yeah, so I don't know. I'm of two minds about some of that stuff,
Hmm.
and maybe I'm just biased. Maybe I think that game developers are less talented than they think that they are. But who knows?
I think it'll. We've touched. I think we've touched on this before. But I mean, gaming is kind of in its pre-teen stage now. I mean, as far as growing, I mean, feels like to me like it's not. We're not. I don't know if we're at a golden age or anything like that for games. I don't know. Actually, I don't know where we're at, but we're not in the infancy of games anymore. But we haven't got to the point now where we're talking about these diversity of voices. That's only going to come over maybe another 10 more years, and then we'll start seeing more and more of that type of stuff where we will see it. It's just a natural. It's just part of the natural order of life, unless of course we as humanity. Not to sound bleak, but of course something else terrible happens, and then we don't see that. But
Yeah,
uh,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know. I mean, the other side of it too is that like I want something different out of games than I want from movies. Like movies, I want a story.
Sure.
I want to weave this tale. Video games, I want to interact with it.
Uh-huh.
I want to play, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you interact with movies. You think about what the characters are doing. You search for motivation. You know you're active observers when you watch a movie, even if you're not directly controlling the characters in the film. But games, it is all about interaction,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I mean that's probably why I'm a Nintendo fanboy, right? And I come by that honestly. I mean, you can look behind me in my living room and see that.
Yeah.
Um, it's because Nintendo, the way they design games is they start with a mechanic,
Yeah.
right? And when they have a fun mechanic that people want to play, then they wrap whatever meaningless story that they need to around it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
everybody talks about Breath of the Wild like it's got some kind of great story. It doesn't. Its story is garbage. It's a worthless story with no stakes
Yeah.
and no drama. It's ultimately the same thing. Kill
Same.
Ganon, right?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing interesting about the storyline, but that's fine. That's not
Yeah.
what it's about. Breath of the Wild is about exploring this massive world in whatever order you want and yelling at the screen when your fucking sword breaks again. Sorry, curse word.
Yeah. It's okay. Well, we're allowed one to two
Yeah,
for sure.
it's a PG-13. It's a
Yeah.
PG-13 podcast. So yeah, I mean, and that's I think why I like Nintendo because their core philosophy is let's find a mechanic that's really good, and then we can figure out how we express that in a fun, artistic way, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for are mechanics. I'm looking for that interaction. I'm looking for it's a different part of my brain that's being entertained when I play games versus when I watch a movie or a
Mhm.
television show.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um. So while we're talking about the game stuff, just to kind of update you on where I'm at here with Warhog, I've started building the assets. My goal, and it was ambitious, was to try to get it animated tonight in a half an hour, which I know, I mean, I was trying. I'm close, but I don't like to rush things too much. I mean, I don't mind rushing a little bit, but we'll get to this next week, and I'll finish it off next week. I think I'm at a good point where we'll have a front running cycle, which is actually pretty challenging because you have to deal with foreshortening of a character. You don't get any. You have no foreshortening with the front as much because everything's a little bit more everything's straight on. It's much more unforgiving compared to
Hmm.
other poses. but
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
fine. We'll get it there. Um,
I mean, I'm impressed with how far you got in a half hour, quite frankly. So, I mean, it's already coming to shape, right? I mean, you're already most of the way there.
yes, yeah. And now
So,
I want to like to I want to fine tune a little bit, and we'll do that next week. We'll hang out and chat more games or whatever
yeah, 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 for
later.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I mean, this is good progress, good conversation. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everybody for tuning in. As always, you can check us out on Patreon. Just go to calamityjane.rocks. It'll take you right to our Patreon site. Please consider subscribing and joining us on this crazy, wacky adventure and make this cartoon a reality. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook and all the places. Presumably, you already know that because you're watching the stream. And otherwise, we'll see you next week. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.